All right, to another doctor. You might better know him as Ron Paul, the presidential candidate, but he is a doctor by training. So, Dr. Paul, what do you make of this?
Well, I think it is not a bad idea to look at over-testing, but I don't think you can deal with over-testing without talking about, the legal and the lawsuits. When you go to the emergency room, believe me, you get over-tested. But it's the threat of a lawsuit that prompts so much of that. Decisions of over-testing or under-testing should be made the old-fashioned way, a decision between the doctor and the patient. So once the government gets involved, or insurance companies, when they become the third party payment encourages over-testing as well. And when that happens, then there's a sort of a type of a rationing. The insurance company will ration by making you get pre-approval and dictate how you practice medicine. But when the government gets involved, and I think this might be trying to head off the rationing and the concern about over expenditures.
Well, see, that's exactly what,
mastermind.
Right. That was my follow-up question, whether that is what's going on here. And these doctors, in other words, this group is saying, all right, ahead of that, here's this.
Yes, I think so, because the insurance companies are very much in bed with the government. When there's negotiations in Washington, whether it's prescription drug programs or health care, the health companies, the insurance companies are very much involved, in the drug companies as well. So they're very close to government. No matter Blue Cross and Blue Shield actually started, and they work very, very closely with Medicare and Medicaid, and especially Medicare. So yes, I don't think it's as easy to separate those two. But if doctors and the patients had the control, and the patients spent their early money, and if they had these medical savings account and they go to the doctor and decide, on this, that's who's supposed to be making these decisions, not blanket decisions. But our professional groups, I'm an OB doctor. If I got a recommendation medically, that would influence me in my thinking. But I think medicine is much more complicated. We have way too much government, and the expenses are off. Once you pump money into anything, whether it's education or housing or medicine, prices go up, and then they start worrying about rationing care. I think that's what's really coming to us.
That would be inevitable, just doing the math. But Congressman, on what the president has been saying about the Supreme Court, about justices and their role, and about being activists and what have you, I thought strange, his talking about political activism one way or the other, but be that as it may. I'm beginning to think that someone has told him on the court he's going to go down on this. I don't know if that's right, but what do you think of his, I wouldn't call it belligerent, but clearly in-your-face approach to the Supreme Court?
Well, it's more than he should be, but that's what the tradition of the presidents have been in the last half a century. The presidents write too many executive orders. They go to war without declarations. They act outside the law. For them to overstep and tell the Supreme Court what to do or have political influence, that really is to be expected. This whole question of judicial review should be rethought, because in our early history, and Jefferson didn't think a whole lot about it, that if it was a bad law and it was unconstitutional and the states didn't like it, they didn't have to live by it. Or if they didn't like what the Congress was doing and they were doing these things, we were supposed to throw our congressmen out. Originally thought, it was never thought the Supreme Court was to have control over every piece of legislation. Just look at the power of one Supreme Court justice. One justice can make all the difference in the world on this. Let's say they were trying to do some good and one justice ruled against it and canceled it all out.
Well,
it was never meant to have that
here.
much
Justice
power.
Kennedy is in that role, right? Let's switch to, we had 3 more primaries last night. You didn't win any of them. You have yet to win one. You come close in a lot of them, sir. But it's a tough sledding for you now, is it not? Is it your view that Mitt Romney is the inevitable nominee now?
Well, he's getting pretty close to that, but the straw votes aren't the final tally. The tally are the delegates, and we have several states. It's up to 6 where we can possibly win the plurality in those states and carry those delegations. So yes, it's a challenge, but we're fighting the lack of coverage that we get. Last night, we had 6,200 show up at Chica at the university. So I looked at the internet today to find out how.
Crowd.
Yeah. I looked for a release on this or an article, so I looked at the internet and they said, "Where's Ron Paul? He's disappeared. He's awfully quiet these days." Of course, we didn't think we were very quiet last night. We thought we had a great turnout. But, we have to buck the trends. The status quo and the people in charge aren't too interested in hearing the challenges that I have with our foreign policy and our monetary policy.
You're staying in this race. You're not going anywhere. It doesn't look like Newt Gingrich, even though he's downsized his campaign a bit, is leaving the race, per se. Rick Santorum staying on at least through Pennsylvania. So you guys are sticking this through, right?
Well, I think that's what the people who support me want me to do, because they don't think we should quit when we're only halfway through the race. And there's a lot of people working their way through the delegate process, and that takes a while. That might be till June or so before we even know what has come.
To what end then, Congressman? I mean, it's a given that you're going to have a big role at the convention. I think Mitt Romney has told me that himself. But beyond that, what would you want?
Well, what I want is to live in a free country, and I believe we're going in the wrong direction. I think we do more harm to ourselves than any threat from any outside force. We undermine our civil liberties. We're bankrupting our country. Our financial situation is much worse than the people really understand, and we fight wars that we shouldn't be fighting. So this is what I want to change, and we're getting the support, especially from the young people, and they don't like what they're getting. And I think we're in the midst of a real serious intellectual revolution in this country, and not only because people are changing their mind, but the system we have is failing. I think more and more people are realizing that the foreign policy is a failure, monetary policy is a failure, and the Federal Reserve is failing, and this debt crisis is a symptom of a total failure.
Well, I'm not blowing you smoke, Congressman, but I've covered you for many years now. You're as honest as the day is long, and as prescient on these economic developments as anyone I know, long before anyone else. So you do have a role to play, big role. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, time running out for the Justice Department. It's facing a Thursday deadline to explain whether the administration thinks judges could strike down federal laws. The president's warning for the Supreme Court on its health care law decision sparked this whole thing, and a number of justices got back and said, you have some splaining to do, and get explaining by Thursday to the judge on what he makes of these judges and their request.
Usually when the president says something at a press conference, in a year when he's running for re-election, it doesn't get inside a courtroom. It's not like the government's lawyers said this to a court or the government's lawyers said this in writing. But yet what he said was so profound and so contrary to over 200 years of settled law that it struck a raw nerve with these judges in Houston who basically said, before we go any further, do you recognize our authority to strike down portions of this law that we may find unconstitutional?
Conservative Republican judges. So the rap against them is, well, they have a political action.
I'll make another rap against them. Judges shouldn't get involved in politics. They probably shouldn't have even concerned themselves with what the president said.
But they did because they said the president got involved in their stuff.
So now the president's involved, the attorney general's involved. Look, he's been ordered to submit a 3-page letter, single space, no less. He's got to fill the 3 pages. He can't fill more, explaining, either justifying the president's position, which would be impossible to justify.
What if he doesn't?
Well, theoretically, he could be held in contempt because it was a direct order that the 3 judges voted that was directed at the attorney general. Look, the attorney general himself, and you and I have disagreed with him many times. He's a former judge. He knows that the president was speaking in a hyperbolic way. He knows that the court has the right to strike down unconstitutional law, and he's going to say that tomorrow at noon.
What is going on with the president and the way he has been speaking out against the court? My cynical opinion is some little birdie in there gave wind to the possibility you're going to lose this thing. And I have no proof of this. This is my opinion. So now I'm thinking after that he is now putting them on the spot in a different way than he did on the floor of the House when he ripped him a new one. What is that about?
I think the president is dangerously close to totalitarianism. A few months ago, he was saying, the Congress doesn't count, the Congress doesn't mean anything, I'm going to rule by decree and by administrative regulation. Now he's basically saying the Supreme Court doesn't count, it doesn't matter what they think, they can't review our legislation. that would leave just him as the only branch of government standing. So I think he has some problems with understanding the Constitution or accepting limitations on his power. Look, they are equal branches of the government, but with respect to what the law means and what the Constitution means, the court is superior to the president.
But other presidents have survived battles with the Supreme Court.
They have.
Will this one?
He probably, well, I don't know if they'll get reelected. But no president in modern times has questioned their authority. They've questioned the way the authority's been exercised.
In other words, they've questioned their decisions and all, but
not their right to make the decision. Correct. This is an extreme view of the Supreme Court and the Constitution, one that has not been articulated since Andrew Jackson was in the White House.
Wow. Wow. You were there for that one.
I was there.
Yes.
I was there, but I did not advise him to say
upset.
that. I told him not to say it.
Right. One of those like white wigs, the whole 9 yards. Judge Napolitano, thank you.
Pleasure, man.
Meanwhile, first on